On behalf of Elaine Marshall, the Honorable Secretary of State of North Carolina, I bring you greetings and thank you for participating in this online training session of the temporary emergency video notarization laws that were recently signed into law here in the state of North Carolina in response to the coronavirus pandemic. We will review the laws very thoroughly such that you have a full and complete understanding of what the laws allow for and how to perform and video notarization utilizing video conferencing technology. Thank you so much for your participation again, and please always feel free to contact us at the Secretary of State's office for any questions that you might have related to any notary issues. Again, welcome to the Temporary Emergency Video Notarization program. We're going to get started right away and talk a little bit about what the new law entails. You can find this in section 4.1 of the session law under continuity of state government regulatory relief, the emergency video notarization. Again, it's in section 4.1. Now, the effective date was May 4th, 2020, and it runs through August 1st of 2020. Now, what this essentially means is that as of August 1st, 2020, we will revert back to the in-person notarization for all notarial acts unless there is a legislative change. Of course, we do recognize that this coronavirus situation has taken us to unexpected places just throughout our society across the country. And so we'll have an opportunity to really ascertain what the good things are about video notarizations and also what some of the perils may be as well. But unless there is a change in the statute, this particular temporary measure is due to expire on August the 1st. So what I would ask each of you to do is to go ahead and make a notation of that right now, such that you will not forget that after the date of August 1st, 2020, you will no longer be able to perform video notarizations, and failure to comply with the law may result in disciplinary action. So we don't want anyone to be caught in that situation. So remember, August the 1st, 2020, this law is going to expire, and it would take a new law, which we would inform you of, if you were to be able to continue to perform notarial acts in this fashion. So let's consider what this new law allows and who it applies to. This applies equally to notaries as well as to electronic notaries. Both of them may perform oaths and affirmations and acknowledgments over video conferencing technology. So what exactly is video conferencing technology? Most of us are familiar with WebEx, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Skype, or various other forms of video conferencing technology that will allow you to engage with an individual over a computer experience. Whether or not, again, it is one of the more widely known conference technologies or something that is emerging. The statute does not prescribe which one a notary may use. Now, I will mention here that there are different industries that may have very specific requirements for what video conferencing technology they want to use based on security, and you would do well to make sure that you were aware of what, say, the mortgage industry or the real estate industry or any other specific industry's preference or policy is regarding video conferencing technology. But the state law does not prescribe or limit a notary from utilizing any of the current video conferencing technologies that are out there, as long as the requirements that we're going to go over are met. And basically what those requirements are that it allows the notary and the individual or individuals that the notary is performing the notarial act for to be able to see one another and hear one another in real time. In other words, you cannot rely on any type of a recording that has been pre-recorded to perform a notarization. All of this has to be done in real time. Now, this also allows for wet ink signatures to be notarized, as well as electronic signatures that are associated with an electronic notarization. Okay, so we're going to break that down as we go through, but understand that a traditional notarization that is made with an ink pen is going to be able to be performed using this video conferencing technology. Likewise, if you are an electronic notary, you will be able to also perform electronic notarizations utilizing video conference technology as well. It is important to understand that notaries are not required to use a video conferencing technology to perform notarizations, although we do strongly encourage that notaries follow all of the social distancing guidelines that we have provided on our website, and obviously that the governor has put forward. There are ways that you might be able to perform notarial acts in person while still meeting the social distancing guidelines that are in place. So it's also important that if you are utilizing this type of process to perform notarizations, that you make sure that you are secure in terms of your ability to positively identify the individual that you're performing the notarization for. If you are not, you certainly do have the ability to refuse to perform the notarial act based on the fact that you aren't certain of that individual's identity. Now, there are a couple of other provisions that I'll make note of now. And one of the things that the new law does is it extended the time period that notaries have to go to the Register of Deeds office in the county of their residence to take their oath. Typically, it was 45 days, but this new law has extended that time period to 90 days. So notaries who are currently receiving their commissions from the Secretary of State's office, they will have 90 days to get to the Register of Deeds office to take their oath of office. Now, electronic notaries, they must use the approved electronic notary solution providers when performing electronic notarizations. Now, that's really important to understand. This is a new process for us in terms of being able to use video technology to perform notarial acts. We have an existing law that governs electronic notaries, and within that existing law, we had to approve solution providers for use in North Carolina. These are still the same electronic notary solution providers that must be used if an electronic notary is going to also perform a video notarization. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get later in the program today. It's also important to understand what this does not allow. There's certain notarial acts that you cannot perform using video conferencing technology. The first of which is the verification or proof, which is one of the 3 notarial acts that authorized in 10B. There's already a very high potential for fraud with the verification or proof, and that is the primary reason why that particular type of notarization is not going to be able to be performed utilizing the video notarization. With the verification and proof, the principal never appears before the notary. They send someone else who's a subscribing witness to appear before the notary to prove that the principal signed the document. And so We have entities like the Department of Motor Vehicles who have outlawed a verification or proof on any of their DMV forms due to the fact that there's just a higher possibility for fraudulent activity with a verification or proof because the principal never appears before the notary. And so we also did not allow this type of notarial act for the video notarization. Now, the other notarial act that notaries are authorized to perform that is prohibited with this particular type of notarial process is the absentee voter ballot. So notaries are authorized to execute absentee voter ballots, but they would have to still do so in the personal presence or while in the personal presence of the voter. You are not allowed to perform absentee voter ballot notarial act utilizing the video conferencing technology that this law authorizes. So understand that those are the limitations. There are no other statutory limitations, but these are two that you do need to be aware of. So let's consider now the requirements for performing an emergency video notarization. Both parties must log into a video conferencing platform like WebEx or GoToMeeting or Zoom. Again, the law doesn't specify, nor does it limit the type of technology that you can use. So it's going to be up to the notary and the person that they're performing the notarial act for to ensure that you are using one that is suitable for your business needs. The notary is going to then positively identify the signer. The forms of positive identification are going to be either personal knowledge, utilizing a credible identifying witness, or satisfactory evidence of identity. Now, these are the same three methods that a notary typically is going to have when establishing the identity of a document signer. Personal knowledge can still be used. Of course, the individual would have to personally know the notary, and the notary would obviously personally know the principal signer. If a credible witness was going to be used to positively identify the signer, and again, a credible witness is someone who personally knows the notary, but who also personally knows the principal signer. This type of identification would be used in a situation where the principal did not have a valid form of identification, nor did they personally know the notary. So a credible witness could be used. Now, the credible witness could be in the presence of the notary, or they could be on the other side of the video call with the principal signer, or they could also be connected in the same video conference call as a third participant who would be able to see and hear and listen to the proceeding, and they could act as a credible witness in that fashion. You would still, as a notary, still have to administer an oath or an affirmation to the credible witness, because they would have to swear or affirm that they did know the individual who was seeking to have their signature notarized. Now, with satisfactory evidence of identity, one of the things that the notary would need to make sure that the individual was going to do if they're going to use an identification card is they would need to hold that identification card up to the camera long enough so that the notary can determine that the signer is who he or she claimed to be. The ID would have to be current or not expired prior to March 1st of 2020 if it is a North Carolina driver's license. And I'll explain the difference between what the specific law states as it relates to the emergency video notarization section, which has a date that states that the law is effective as of March the 10th, or that the identification documents can't be expired prior to March the 10th. But here, we're talking about March the 1st. And that is because with North Carolina driver's licenses, there was also an emergency law that was passed that essentially states that North Carolina driver's licenses and other forms of identification that are issued from the DMV, such as a state ID, if expired, they are going to be current as of March the 1st. And because the law deems that they are current, that is congruent with what our law says as it relates specifically to the electronic or video notarization, in that we have to rely on what is a current identification card. So in essence, if it is a driver's license from North Carolina, as long as it is not expired prior to March 1st of 2020, it's going to be acceptable. Now, if it is not a North Carolina driver's license, suppose it is a military ID card, then what we're looking at is a date of March the 10th, where it cannot be expired prior to March the 10th if it's anything other than a North Carolina driving license or other credential issued from the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles. And we do have information related to this on our FAQ page on the Secretary of State's website if you want more information about that. The ID also has to be issued by a state, federal, or tribal government agency, has to have a picture of the person's face. And here's another subtle difference. Has to have a physical description and the signature. In the traditional law, it only requires a physical description or a signature. But for emergency video notarizations, both of these must be present on the identification document that is going to be presented to establish that individual's identity. Okay, so you must first positively identify that individual when you are performing the notarial act. Now, once you've established the identity of the individual, each principal is going to have to indicate to the notary what county they are in. You are only able to perform video notarizations for individuals who are in the state of North Carolina. And of course, you as a notary must also be in the state of North Carolina. If the principal signer was in some other state or some other country, you would not be able to perform that notarization. Now, how is it that you're going to determine what county the individual is in? You simply are going to need to ask them what county they are in, and they're going to respond to you telling you what county they're in, and you're going to need to record that not only in your journal, but also on a special notary certificate that has been prepared for emergency video notarizations as well. The notary must watch the principal, identify, and sign each document. Also, you're going to be required to indicate in your journal what type of document it was, and that you watch that individual sign the document. Now, let me make a point of distinction here between what you are accustomed to in terms of traditional notarization. If the document required an acknowledgement in the past or prior to this law, that document could have been signed at any point in time prior to the document being notarized. However, under the new EVN law, the documents must be signed in the presence of the notary, or while the notary is observing the individual sign the document. That is true for both oaths and affirmations, which had always been the case, but it is now true for emergency video notarizations for those signatures that need to be acknowledged also. Now, in the event that individual needs to be sworn in or to take an oath or an affirmation, notary is authorized to administer oaths via video notarization as well. This has great applicability to notaries who are also serving in the capacity as court reporters. So court reporters certainly are able now to administer oaths utilizing the video conferencing technology. All of the same procedures would need to follow or take place, whereby you would positively identify the individual, and I will show you shortly how you would go about doing that. And then you would have the person raise their right hand if you were administering an oath, and you would literally administer the oath and take that person's oath over the video. So let's break for just a second from the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to demonstrate for you how you would go about positively identifying the individual that you're performing the notarization for. And this is going to hopefully help you to be able to understand better how you are going to be able to make sure that the individual that you are performing the notarization for is who they say they are. Okay, so what we're going to do is I will attempt to demonstrate to you what you as a notary will do in terms of positively identifying the individual. So you're going to ask them to hold their identification document up to the camera so that you'll be able to get a good full view of the ID. And you want to have them hold it up there long enough so that you can make it out, okay? So you will see that I did cover up some of my personal information because you don't need that. So, and then what you can also do is have them hold the picture up. So you're just looking at the picture side of the ID, and then you can compare the image on the picture with the person who you are performing the notarization for. Now, this obviously is not going to be as good as we can do with the individual being in person. However, this, under these emergency circumstances, this is what we are going to have to do in order to establish that person's identity. And so we should be able to do a pretty good job. If for some reason the identification is too blurry or you cannot make it out, you cannot establish that this person is who they claim to be, then you have the right and should either request another form of identification, or you would need to refuse to perform the notarization. And so as it relates to the document that the individual is going to sign, you're going to be required to view the document so that they tell you what that document is. And so it's best to have them hold the document up to the computer screen, to the camera, so that you can see the document, all right? And then what you're going to need to do is record the type of document it is. And you're also going to need to observe that person sign this document. And so to the extent that you can watch the individual sign this document, you want to do that. And after they have signed the document, then You want to have them show you that document again, this time with the signature on there. All right. And so you will have had satisfied the requirements for positively identifying the document signer, but also you would have had satisfied the requirements for making sure that that individual has signed that document in your presence. So let's move on from the demonstration and kind of walk you through some of what it is that we just showed you. For documents that need to have the original wet signature notarized, there's a particular procedure that we will go through. Now, let me make sure that you clearly understand that this law allows for, let's say, two types of signatures to be notarized. The first one that we're going to look at is the original wet signature. This is going to be important for documents that require an original wet signature, as well as the original notarization, and the types of documents that you might think about in terms of this would be documents that say are going to the Register of Deeds office, or that will be filed with the Register of Deeds office. Those documents require the original signature. So nothing about this new emergency video notarization law has changed the requirements for the electronic or the recording ability or capabilities or requirements for the Register of Deeds office. And so in some instances, the signature that needs to be notarized will need to be the original wet signature notarization. So that's one method of performing this notarization. But there are other documents that may not be recorded at a public filing entity or anything like that, and don't need to have the originals of the principal signature or the notary signature in seal. And so we're going to take a look at how you would perform notarizations in instances where the original signatures are not also needed. So let's focus on what has to happen when the original wet signature needs to be notarized. The principal must sign the document while being observed over the video conference technology, and we just demonstrated that for you. The principal must send a copy then of the signed document by electronic means on the same day. So this document that I just signed in front of you over the video, I would need to send a copy of that to you by electronic means. I could fax it, I could email it, I could put it in the Dropbox, I could take a picture of it or send it to you that way. Doesn't make a difference how I get it to you in the electronic form, but I would need to do that on that same day that we engaged over the video conferencing technology. Now, the principal must also send the original signed paper copy to the notary by mail or other delivery method. So after I have submitted this to you electronically, I'm then going to put it in the mail. I'm going to send it by courier. I'm going to put it in, some other type of delivery mechanism, UPS, FedEx, or DHL, or whatever it might be, so that you will ultimately end up receiving the original document that you watched me sign. Now, once you receive the originally signed paper copy of the document, you're going to compare it to the electronic version of that signed document that I sent to you on the day that you performed the notarization for me. And I'm going to compare it to make sure that it is indeed the same document. And that is the purpose and the reason for having the principal send that electronic version of the document to you, such that when you get the original document, you're going to be able to compare it, and then you're going to go ahead and complete the notary certificate. Now, it's very important to understand that the date on this notary certificate is going to reflect the date that the notary observed the signing on the video conferencing technology. In other words, if it was Monday, May the 1st, and we had the video conference technology going, and I watched you sign the document after I positively identified you, and then on that same day, you sent me an electronic copy of the document, and you put the original in the mail, it might be 2 or 3 days later. So now it's May 4th, and I received the document in the mail. After comparing it, I would go ahead and I complete the, let's call it the acknowledgement certificate, where it would say on this particular day, this particular person personally appeared before me and acknowledged his signature. Well, the date that I would include there would be the date of May 1st, because that is the date that I took your acknowledgement. Okay, so it's very important to understand and remember that the date that you're going to put in the traditional notarial certificate language wording is that of the same date that the notarial act actually took place. So that is what is going to happen when you are performing a notarial act and the wet signature needs to be notarized. Now, after you have affix your stamp and signature on the document that you notarized, what you would do is you would send that document back to the principal by whatever method was previously established. In other words, you might stick it in an envelope that they had prepared and sent a self-addressed stamped envelope, so that you just stick it back in that envelope and send it back to them or to wherever they wanted that document to go. Or they might have needed you to send it back by courier or whatever, but that's something that you would agree to in advance. Now, the other thing that I'll mention here that the statute does not make reference to is payment, and how would the notary go about collecting payment. Number one, the fees do not charge or change. So it is still $5 per signature for a traditional notarization, and $10 per signature if you're performing an electronic notarization. So that does not change. You would need to work out with the individual that you're performing the notarization for how to go about receiving, transmitting the funds that you might charge for a particular notarial act. And so that's going to be between you and your principal signer to figure out how to make sure that you receive a compensation for the notarial act. Now, I mentioned that signing and notarizing the original wet signature is one method of performing this particular service. The other is when the document does not require the original signature and original notarization to be notarized. In other words, if a document that had been faxed over or emailed over that had been signed, if the notary is able to print that document and then notarize the actual signature that was on the fax document or that was on the email document, if that is going to be sufficient for the individual who needs this document, the notary can perform that notarization on the same day. Now, this is a little bit different also in terms of what the law formally had required, because the statute says, or at least the administrative code indicates, that you as a notary must notarize an original signature, and you cannot notarize copies of signatures or fax signatures. Well, with this new emergency video notarization law, you are authorized to notarize a signature that has been faxed over to you or that you have received via email or Dropbox or other electronic method. So what would happen if you were performing this particular type of notarization? Just like we talked about with the previous situation, the principal would need to sign that document while being observed over video conference technology. The principal would then fax or email or Dropbox that signed document to the notary on the same day. Now, the notary is then going to need to print that document and then complete the notary certificate and send it back to the signer on the same day. Okay? So this is going to be able to be utilized in situations where the original signature is not required. If the original signature is going to be required to be notarized, then we have to follow the previous process that we talked about. But in instances where that is not something that is needful, and the person is in a bigger hurry or they have a greater sense of urgency, then the notary is going to be able to affix their signature and seal on the actual document that they retrieve in print from the fax, Dropbox, or email. Okay? So now let's move on and talk a little bit about the journal requirements, because the law specifically mandates that journals must be kept, and they must be kept in a secure location for at least 10 years from the date that this particular video notarization has taken place. Now, you are required to keep certain information in the journal, including the time of day, the date of the completion of the emergency video notarization, and that notarial certificate, the date that you completed both of those. The name of the principal signer needs to be recorded. The type of the notarial act that you perform, whether it's an acknowledgement or an oath or an affirmation, the type of document that you notarize, or if it was some sort of a proceeding like a deposition, you would record that in your journal as well. The type of identification presented, including, if applicable, the issuing agency, the identification number that's on the ID. I'll take this moment to mention to you that a driver's license number can be recorded in the journal normally, but under this new law, it is a requirement for it to be recorded in the emergency video notarization journal. If you turn in your Notary Public Manual, the required Notary Public Manual that was published in 2016, on page number 34, down at the last sentence there, it makes reference to the fact that the driver's license number should not be recorded in the journal. You'll take a moment and line through that and cross that out and understand that it can be recorded in the journal. Although it is protected under the 2005 Identity Theft Act, that act only protects the driver's license number in instances where the document that it is recorded in or would be recorded in is due or intended to be published. Because the journal is not something that is designed to be published, then you are able to, under normal circumstances, record the driver's license number in the journal. That is not something that is required under our traditional laws, but under this electronic video notarization law, or the temporary law that we're dealing with now, it is a requirement for you to record the driver's license number or any other identification number that is outlined on the acceptable form of identification that you're going to rely on. You also are going to need to record in the type in your journal the type of video conferencing technology that you use during the emergency video notarization, whether it's WebEx or Zoom or GoToMeeting or Team or whatever it is, that needs to be recorded. A statement that the notary and each principal signer could see and hear one another must also be included in the journal. And if there are other people who are in the room at the time of the notarization, those individuals need to be documented in your journal as well. It's not that you are performing a notarization for them, but you're just recording who was in the room. There is a question that you may have regarding children. If they are minors in the room, they likely will not have identification documents anyway, so you would just simply record in your journal that there were 2 or 3 or however many minors that were in the room while you're performing the notarization. But for anyone who is of age or an adult, you would record the names of those individuals, and it would be best if you were able to have those individuals provide identification so you could have an accurate accounting of the people who were in the room at the time that you were performing the emergency video notarization. Now, we did include in an emergency COVID video journal on our website such that you would be able to download it. It is one that you can access. You can complete it electronically as it is form fillable, or you can just print it and make copies of it so that you can prepare your own journal. In fact, I have a sample of what that journal looks like, and you can see here that it includes all the information that is required and some additional information: the date completed, the time, the name, the type of notarial act, the type of identification that was recorded. It asks whether or not other persons were present, and then if so, who were they? Was the original wet signature notarized? And that would need to be answered yes or no, and if yes, on what date it was notarized, and that has reference to the date that you interact with that individual over the video conference. But also you would want to include the date that you completed the actual certificate as well, the county where the principal is located at the time of the notarization, and that is why you're going to need to ask them what county they're in. The signature is not something that is required, but if you are working electronically, it may be that you're able to capture their electronic signature, and if you're able to do that, we certainly encourage that, but it is not something that is required due to the fact that typically they're not going to be able to be in close enough proximity to sign your journal unless, of course, they have a means to sign it electronically. You want to indicate what type of audio-visual technology was used, and could they see and hear one another. And so this is a sample of that journal. Again, it is provided at no charge on our website for your use. Now, there's also a very specific notary certificate that needs to be used when you're performing an emergency video notarization. Now, this particular type of notarization, it does not do anything to change the customary language that you will find in the acknowledgement certificate or the jurat certificate for the oath or the affirmation. However, there is some additional language that needs to be included on every emergency video notarization that you perform. The language is required to state in terms of the notary, I sign this notary certificate on whatever date you signed the notarial certificate according to the emergency video notarization requirements contained in 10B25. Now, let me go back to that date. We talked about the date that you would complete when you perform the actual notarial act and the date that you would include in the acknowledgement certificate. Again, if you interacted with the individual over the video conference on May the 1st, that would be the date that you included in the actual acknowledgement certificate, which would read something to the effect that on May 1st, John Smith personally appeared before me and acknowledged that he signed this document, so on and so forth. But if he mailed that document to you because it required an original signature and an original notarization, and you didn't get that document until May the 4th, then you would put May the 4th here in this date section, because this is when you would have signed the notarial certificate on May 4th, according to the emergency video notarization requirements. Okay, the certificate is also required to indicate the county that the notary was in during the emergency video notarization, but also the county where the principal signer stated they were in. Again, this is not something that you're going to need to prove or verify beyond asking them what county they're actually in when you're performing the notarization. And then you're going to record that on this required section of the certificate as well. If this wording is not on the notarial certificate, and because this is such a new law, there is a possibility that it may not be on the certificate that is presented to you. You must understand that it is your responsibility to make sure that you have included this wording on the certificate. You can write this wording on the certificate, and in fact, you have a responsibility to write this language on the certificate if you're completing emergency video notarization. Now, to assist you with this, we have created certificates on our website for all the various notarial acts, so that you can just go there and download them, so that you won't have to worry about having to write all this information. You can simply staple it to the back of the signature page and fill out the notary certificate that is included here. And so this is a portion of the notary certificate that is new. And this is the language and how it would read on the certificates that are on the bottom of each of our certificates that are on posted on our website. I signed this notary certificate on May the 4th, according to the example that we've been working with, according to the emergency video notarization requirements contained in General Statute 10B. Then it goes on, you fill this part out. The notary public location during the video notarization was Wake County. And then the stated physical location of the principal during the video notarization was, and then whatever county they indicated they were in, whether it was Durham County or Johnson County or Mecklenburg County, you would include that here. And that is the required statutory language that must be included on every notary certificate that's completed when you're performing an emergency video notarization. Now, we've also included this optional section to be filled out as well. And it is optional, but what it is some sort of a fraud deterrent, or as much as we can make it a fraud deterrent, such that you would fill out some of this information that kind of describes the document that this notary certificate would be attached to. When you're stapling or attaching a notary certificate to a document, we oftentimes got the question as to, well, how do we know that a person will not remove that certificate from the document that you notarized and attach it to another document? Well, it's very difficult to prevent that from happening, but one of the things that we thought we could do is to have this optional section where it says this certificate is attached to, and in our example, we use an affidavit for legal proceedings, so we could include that signed by, and the name of the person who signed it, and then the date that they signed it, and indicate the number of pages. So this would make it that much more difficult for someone to remove this certificate from this particular document to another document that might not have been titled the same, signed by a different person on a different date, and was a different number of pages. So it's just a little bit of a fraud deterrent measure that we thought would be helpful. Now, we also want to talk just a little bit about electronic notarizations, okay? Because not only can you perform what we kind of walked through at this point was how you would perform a emergency video notarization where the original signature, a wet ink signature, would be notarized, or one that was faxed to you would be notarized. But you're also able to perform electronic notary video notarizations as well. Now, what this would require is one of our approved electronic notary solution providers solutions. They would need to be used, and you can only use one that has been approved already. And by the way, only those who have registered as electronic notaries can perform electronic notarization. So this law does not authorize regular notaries to perform electronic notarizations. You literally have to be an electronic notary, which means that you have gone to take an additional 3-hour course of instruction, and you've taken an oath of office for the electronic notary registration in order to become an electronic notary. But those electronic notaries who use one of our approved solutions can also use one of the video conferencing platforms like WebEx, GoToMeeting, Zoom, or what have you, in conjunction with their electronic notary solution, such that the individual would no longer need to be in the same physical location, but they would be able to be at a distance where they would be able to have their electronic signature notarized using a video conferencing solution. Now, the approved solution providers that you can find on our website, and the website is listed here below, Worldwide Notary, Simplifile, Settleware, DocVerify, DocuSign, CSC, Basso. These are the only authorized electronic notary solution providers in the state of North Carolina. So if you're using an electronic notary solution provider, you must use one of these. Now, something quickly about the Register of Deeds. I made reference to this earlier because it's really important. The Register of Deeds, they still require original signatures on recorded documents. And so that's why it's really important to understand and to ask the individual who you're performing that notarization for, you know, are original signatures needed on this document? And if so, they will follow the process that we walk through. They'll sign that document in your presence via the video, but then they're going to have to mail that document to you. And once they mail that document to you, you'll be able to affix your signature and seal on that original document and send it back to them by mail or courier or what have you, right? So that's really important to know. None of the Register of Deeds processes or policies have changed regarding the original signature requirements. And as it relates to administering the notary oaths, registers of deeds are also authorized by this new law, just as notaries are, to be able to administer oaths by video conference technology as well. And so when you are renewing, if you have to renew during this period of time, you can check with them to find out what their process is for getting you signed up to take the notary oath by video conferencing means as well. And finally, we have some resources for you on our Secretary of State's webpage. We are building this out. We'll have frequently asked questions. This video will live there as well. The certificates, the journal that we went over, You'll be able to access all those things on this particular website. You're also going to be able to contact our customer service department at notary@sosnc.gov or by telephone at 919-814-5400, option number 2. So I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to make sure that you are up to speed and are aware of all of the new notary laws that have come about as it relates to emergency video notarizations that have occurred based on the COVID-19 pandemic. And we trust that you will continue to serve the notaries or the communities that you live in at a very high level by providing this very important service that allows us to continue to keep our economy literally moving in the state of North Carolina. So thank you so very much for your service, and we do encourage each of you to practice social distancing guidelines while performing notarial acts, to utilize these tools as much as you possibly can, and to stay safe. Thank you so very much.